All right, Jonas Brothers. Happiness Begins. 10 years.
The comeback.
2009. Lines, Vines, and Trying Times. Their last album, and now
Yep.
Happiness Begins. They had it's weird. So they released a documentary with this, which I didn't get a chance to watch, but apparently it kind of details a bit of, I don't know if like a falling out is necessarily the way to put it, but like Nick and Joe seem to kind of be like dicking over Kevin in a sense, over the last 10 years, and now they're back together.
Yeah, I mean, I think that documentary's on Prime right now, and the Jonas Brothers obviously like split, went on hiatus or whatever. When that happens to most boy bands at some point, but they're kind of a unique case because they weren't put together on a reality show or matched up because they were all good at dancing or anything. They're literally family, right? So Kevin, like, he's the oldest one, and he went and got married way back then. And around that time, like, they split, and I think it came out since that it was Nick who was kind of like the biggest star of the trio, kind of wanted to split and branch off. And I know he had his own little group for a little bit, and then him and Joe just really had solo careers, and Kevin just kind of fell off. And I mean, as we get into it, it's just kind of wild that Jonas Brothers are back, more famous, more popular than ever before, which you don't usually say when it comes to boy band comebacks. Like Backstreet Boys came back this year. NSYNC had a big moment at Ariana's Coachella set, and apparently they were testing a reunion tour buzz. But Jonas Brothers coming back like they never left. It's kind of wild.
Yeah, I've seen a lot of people tweeting about their upcoming concert or concert tours and things like that, and
arenas.
Yeah, it's crazy. They sold out MSG pretty quickly, which is obviously the biggest one by me. But the amount of stands out there for the Jonas Brothers all this time later is impressive. And they dropped this album again, Happiness Begins, and it's interesting because we heard the singles, and I wasn't necessarily super excited for this album. Didn't really have high hopes in terms of this being like one of my favorite albums of the year, but I thought it could be a solid pop album. But the single Sucker, Cool, things like that, I was like, oh, this is incredibly pop. This sounds like a bit of a departure from who they used to be. And I feel like that's kind of what the album is it's just like, it's this very generic sounding pop rock, kind of just like cool pop rock in a sense. And really left me just kind of thinking, okay, this is a band that just wants to remain in that sphere of being inoffensive, just kind of wants to play it safe in a sense. That's kind of what it felt like to me. How did you feel about this album?
Yeah, good points there. The sound didn't really throw me off, even though it is a departure from the group's previous sound, because Nick's solo career, which was solid for a few years. Jealous was a big hit for him. That was all pretty standard, middle of the road radio pop. Sex jams. Purity Rings, Long Gone, right? And then Joe, funny, like he was in that band DNCE, Cake by the Ocean, legitimate hit for him. And I was like, oh wait, that's Joe Jonas. Like I don't even know how many people realized that was him when they heard that song. And that was more of a carefree pop, a little. I guess it sounded like it was more from a pop band. Fine, but then hearing them come together on this, yeah, the soft pop rock that they used to have on some of their big hits, like SOS. Like there's some like you hear like heavy drums on those early Jonas Brothers hits, right? You actually hear the guitars a lot. And now, I mean, you look at these credits, like Greg Kurson is on Happiness Begins. And that shouldn't shock you if you listen to any of the early stuff, even the stuff he's not really involved. It just kind of sounds like it's informed of what works today. And while I do think they try and explore some of their, past decades of experiences on some of the slower songs, especially towards the end of the track list, there are a lot of songs that are just clearly attempts to become the next hit, become the next radio hit. But it's tough to blame them for that because, as we said, they're more popular than ever. But Sucker, the first single, which I was not a big fan of, I think it's fine, but really not for me. That was the number one song in the country, top of the Billboard chart. they had never done that before. They had a lot of legitimate hits back then, but they never actually went number one. And then their first comeback single immediately went number one. So
Mhm.
it's definitely more in line with mainstream pop today than anything they had ever done before. So I guess that can be disappointing if you wanted them to be more artistic. I do think there are a lot of bops on here, though. So I guess it really depends what you're looking for.
Hey, what are those bops that stood out to you?
Uh, I think the clear highlight for me on the album is Only Human, which is
Mhm.
towards the beginning. I just really like that beat, and I think the lyrics they just kind of bounce on that song. It sounds really fun. Um, Ultimately, I think a lot of these like attempts at radio hit play, attempts at hits, your temperature might vary on some of these middle album cuts, the songs that aren't trying to be more lyrical. Just because I honestly have a hard time telling the difference between Nick and Joe on this album.
Hmm.
Neither one is an amazing vocalist. They're both fine. They're both good enough. But ultimately, that was what took me out of it at points was that their vocals aren't strong enough to make up for songs that just compositionally are just okay, or just whatever. But honestly, I was satisfied, especially because I was really low on Sucker and Cool. But then
Mhm.
listening to the whole thing, I'm like, all right, there's a little more here than I expected, and it'll placate the fans as we know. So it's a
Yeah,
very
I,
interesting situation.
I think if anyone bought their ticket to see the Jonas Brothers live this summer, like when they first came out, they're not going to be disappointed by this album. I think enough of these songs are good enough to be enjoyable, especially live. I'm sure they'll add a little bit more of a bite to them. I found actually the beginning of the album to be sounding a little bit too samey in terms of just like the rhythm of the songs. They all seem to be kind of almost formulaic in a sense. I enjoyed, I think, the second half of the album a little bit more. Songs like Trust and even the closing song Comeback. I
Mhm.
thought was actually a pretty good ballad and a nice closer. Um, I think there's enough here where people will be able to enjoy this, but I don't think this is going to be a very memorable album in terms of end of year lists or moving forward. Something people are going to come back to the Jonas Brothers. Their earlier work is really what I think will define them until they make that next great Jonas Brothers album.
Yeah.
Who knows when that will be? Any last thoughts before we move on to Tyga?
um, I really am just genuinely impressed with how they've rocketed up their fame on this
Hmm.
comeback. Maybe part of that is the significant others of Nick and Joe, Sophie T and Priyanka, but
Yeah,
I don't know. I actually enjoy them as celebrities, so I'm happy they're back.
yeah. They made that video of them on the boat listening to Golden Hour, which I
Yeah.
stand for that video.
There's the Game
That's
of
a great one.
Thrones
So
bit too. Like they're
yeah,
funny. They're self aware guys, so good for them.
yeah, they're fun.